Welcome back to the course on product engineering design thinking. Today it is lecture number 36 and it is module 8. Today we will be discussing design driven innovation. Now, from the very beginning you have understood that when something is being said driven, it means that a special emphasis is being placed on it. Of course, it is. And then we will see that not like the common belief that all the innovations are only just by improving on technology alone is not really true, because from the existing technology or state of the art technology is also based on the innovative design or rather radical creation of a meaning in a product and the design thereof. Offering can be made which actually drives the customer to a sense that they should own it. Now, we will go to the detail subsequently, but then here we would talk about the context of the importance of this innovation or design driven innovation in the overall perspective of value proposition. The value proposition is all the very important thing, because after all at the end of the day, this is what attracts or motivates the customer to consider why they should possess something, buy something, pay for something. So, what value is being proposed? That is the important question. So, whenever any organization is trying to create a business, manufacturing, engineering, any oriented, then the first thing is what it is going to do, what is going to serve, how it is going to solve the problem of the customer. So, that where comes the value proposition. Now, we will talk about that. Then we will discuss briefly on how the strategy of design driven innovation is varying from that one of the design thinking we discussed, particularly focusing on creating meaning in a product. Like the Apple created a new meaning of listening to music on the go with the iPod, or many such examples. We will talk about the DDI steps, design thinking, design driven innovation steps. We would talk about the examples of this design driven innovation cases. We would talk about the paradigm in design discourses with exemplification, and also we will examine whether this design driven innovation can be interfaced with or coupled with some other existing or available paradigms, methodologies, like say design thinking or technology innovation together. So, if we can do that, that also will create another mode of or paradigm, hybrid paradigm, and then finally we will talk about what is the action plans or steps or roadmap for design thinking, design driven innovation. So, with this preamble, let us go in, and so here, as we mentioned, that the value proposition, as I said, is the value proposition is the primordial causality. That is the first reason, primary reason why that drives a buyer to own the product. It is precisely the statement that value proposition statement is precisely determines the success and failure of the company, because it states. And also to be remembered, as I just now had said, that for a business it is important. So, this is central to business model, or particularly if we talk about structured framework, we can call it business model canvas. It is actually the central piece in the business model canvas. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the business model canvas, its value proposition, component, etc. in a subsequent lecture. But today what we will do is we will talk about the value proposition. The sound value proposition, among other things, consists of three salient attributes. They are well defined offerings, it addresses the and relieves the user's pain points, and how it is differentiated from the competitors' offerings. Now, design driven research, this carried out during front end, as we said that the front end is very important, and always it is so, because the concept gets determined there, and it is most impactful at this stage. However, it remains a challenge for the designer to obtain a meaningful, or rather foresight bracing feedback from users when developing futuristic products and concepts. Because it is a futuristic, so the customer may not fully be aware of the requirement. We will talk with the examples or quotations of Henry Ford or Steve Jobs to see why it is important. We will go to that. So, how this futuristic viewpoints or assumptions, how can that be handled when they have not much exposure in that area yet? The solution is proposed to be through design driven innovation. Now, we will see what is this. Now, design thinking, as we have seen, is focused on the stated or explicit needs, because customer tells what the needs are, what the pain points are, and accordingly the products are developed. And it is argued that assumptions are not easy to validate before product launch. So, the one solution is that, okay, if an MVP can be created, then through that certain validation happens, and that is possible. But when it comes to implicit needs or unstated needs, that is the one, but it is not expressed, unexpressed needs. Then it comes, the design driven innovation comes into play, which says that we have to go in depth research and find out what is there and how, with the available other resources, we can address those futuristic issues. It is, I will explain that. So, it is focused on implicit needs, generally which has not been well stated, realize that the worth of a product is by orienting towards individual's experience and not by imposing technology. So, basically just assimilating certain technology and make an offering is not the desired outcome. Desired outcome is when the user experience it in a favorable manner and wants to buy it. Though they begin with the same user perspective, both design thinking and design driven, but the user research customers have limited engagement, as we said in the case of former, that is design thinking. So, what we can see that this design thinking, or which is called human centered design or HCD, the strategy is outside in, that we take outside view and try to put it in the organization or its activity or in design, internal design discourse, or it's in design discourse. So, outside in is the approach in design thinking, whereas in case of design driven innovation, it is inside out. That means, how this inside out is possible? It is not ignoring the customer's viewpoints, but also to conduct research and create knowledge base, enhance knowledge base, acquisition of knowledge. Through that, some enrichment comes, and through that, the thought of creating a design that solves or would solve a problem that the customer has not anticipated yet, but through that in-depth analysis, study and cognition and through research, that problem is found out, which we call implicit need. And that is what differentiates the design thinking and design driven innovation. But let us not forget, both are ultimately customer centric. Now, we have discussed that DDI mainly would be working around the implicit demand, implicit need, and then it is actually creating a meaning. It is just not assimilation of technology, or it is just not a set of function or features. It creates a meaning. Why? I mean, what is the purpose of it? We question the purpose. Why it is this? Why it is to be built? Why it is to be built to solve a problem? Why the product is there? That is the question. The focus of this design driven innovation, which is radical in nature. It is not incremental per se, because we are going in depth and trying to find out the requirement through research, and also the technology options, resource options by research. And due analysis and critiquing, which is done very through, which is not very categorically stressed in design thinking approach. So, consequently, DDI aims to address the users' inferential motives and provide meaningful outputs or products. So, here we can say that it can be considered also a design driven strategy, or rather it is a kind of a design push strategy. It is a push strategy, design push strategy. There are other tools which of course which actually is called design driven innovation by Roberto Verganti, besides the other two very commonly available strategies called market pull strategy and technology strategy or tech strategy. So, and also let us not forget that the world is now having a shift or transfer between physical product and digital product. Many products which where physical is now becoming digital, and many digital applications are also having its physical configuration. The challenge remains in this to add value, to create a new meaning and experience a new result out of this redesigning. This is the radical perspectives and steps. The radicality is this, that the to create and change meaning, the meaning of the product, why, this why part or the purpose is the main question, and it is educed by the manufacturer that redefines what a product may potentially mean to the customers, what it means, what a music system would mean, what a car would mean. That is very important. What a dining in a restaurant means. Is it just eating food, or it is creating a meaning? Maybe a dining would create a memory in a restaurant or a coffee shop. So, that is what perhaps you have heard about companies like say Starbucks, and here in India we have Cafe Coffee Day, and so that they actually are creating that experience, and so they are creating a meaning out of their service. Similarly, here we are talking about the product. Now, the method, DDI method, is having three steps. First is gathering information and data by listening and absorbing regarding how people associate the sense of purpose, what actually it has to do, why they will hire the product to get the job done, why, or as meaning of things. This is called meanings of things. Interblending such information or data accumulated in the this step with the insight to build a quintessential design, and then to create a more rounded proposition is the third step. So, design driven innovation tries to instill in the customer a propensity that they buy and create new market and expand or create a new business. Here it is, you can see the strategy of design driven innovation, a radical approach based on change of meaning. Here what you see is this, that there are, if we say that incremental change, and then you see there is a radical change on the other side. Here the in between there is a semi-radical change. So, you would perhaps notice that radical changes are relatively lesser compared to incremental changes. So, that kind of approach has been considered in this diagram, and here you see that the when the radical change in meaning and disruptive technology, that is push, that is disrupt the market, the new product is bringing that disruption in the market, replacing the old products and creating a new market for itself. That is disrupting, called disruptive technology, and this technology is a push and or it is a push driven innovation. So, when these two things coincide, it creates according to Verganti, it's called technology epiphanies in this yellow region. But in other regions also you see that incremental innovation happens, or push-pull aligned. Sometimes what happens is also a thing that it may not be entirely on market pull or entirely not be technology push, but based on some created technology, some alignment is sought out now, that how that technology can be used in a particular market. So, there the alignment comes. Similarly, for a market pool, how the technology can aid it further. So, that kind of alignment happens, particularly for the technology push kind of a thing, where one has to look for the market. So, that alignment, which also yields result. Now, here on one side you see the y axis, you see the technology, and other side what you see, that is the purpose or why, that is emphasized, which is expressed in the term of the Verganti called meaning, the meaning of a product. It gives a meaning to the product. Here and also when you are saying meaning, as we had already discussed about or will be discussing about the this user experience, that also will go together, that meaning also has that flavor in there. Now, here we will go to certain examples. We will take the example of Fiat Panda. Why Fiat Panda? Because this is a car model which has lasted for 40 years. It is and when a product continues for that long, across four decades, it means that this continuous thinking what my customer would need tomorrow is always being considered, and that is the essence of design driven innovation. So, let us see how it is doing it. Now, in case of this thing, that according to studies, its design considerations are based on high degree of rationality and accessibility, and it incorporates smart solutions for practical utility, versatility and use at an affordable price amongst the other products and product portfolios. So, affordability aspect also is there. Why? Because it provides a sense of value. We will come to that, but before that, let us see what this Fiat Panda has done. If we look at the design innovation features as below, it has created a visibility enhancement. That means they have made the the panels thinner or smaller, narrower, and the glass part is more. So it gives a 360 degree view of the of the environment. So when one is inside the car, it is visibility is more. It gives a different kind of meaning that someone is in that environment, is a part of that. It gives a meaning. Designing uncluttered interior, the car is small, but how this spaciousness is being felt, that is what is the consideration. So it is not a new technology always, it is a design aspect that is coming in the fore. How do we design so that a new meaning is being created out of the available technology solutions? So uncluttered interior, how it has been done, we have listed it out. You can read it later in detail, which you will find in subsequent slides. I will show the slides, but we will pass through because those are detailed out. Weight and cost reduction by doing say removing the rail on the top of the car, and which is used for the snow and rain, but if it can be removed, that weight will be lessened, and there are few other things that happen, so it reduces the weight and cost. There is an electronic braking assist at within certain distance, which is quite progressive at that point in time. It will give through a lidar sensor the assessment that okay, a car is close, so accordingly the action is to be taken. So electronic braking assist, electronic communication connectivity, because now everybody feels that everywhere it is should be connected all over. So we will show how they did that. Electronic communication connectivity in building. Now during COVID, what they did is a full dress sanitizing system they implemented, including the purification, air purification and sanitizing activities. And finally, they have again that vision continued, that first foresee and develop through design is that HV versioning. Through the continuous design discourse intervention, it has been achieved. Here, what I will show you, these are the details. I need not read out the details, but I have already explained what are these. As I said that drip rails were removed in case of weight and cost reduction. The unclutteredness, you can see that briefly I am saying that created by rearrangement, all furnishings and the roof lining are done away with the springs for the rear seats. Also the panels and dashboards are kept uncluttered to the best possible extent. So it gives a sense of spaciousness. For this abrasion corrosion resistor, what they did was to have a protective band at the lower part of the car, so that if it slightly rubs, then also there will be no scratch. Incidentally, that becomes a very I would say attractive design symbol. People like that lower part with that band, and that gives some attractiveness. Although it was intended for scratch resistance, abrasion resistance and corrosion resistance, but people liked it for other reasons too. So that became a thing. Electronic braking assist, I have already discussed that. The lidar sensor, where the range is 12 meter, so that it detect an imminent impact and apply brakes. Electronic communication connectivity, here I would just like to touch upon few points for reasons, is that a communication connectivity became a vital requirement in this model. In its segment was first to provide a cradle smartphone holder, which we see in many cars today, and a navigation feature which was created by Waze, and then a feature into an app. That app was created by Uconnect with a built-in Wi-Fi that was created by Wind Communication. Now you can understand that these are the things created by other companies. The technology was developed by other companies. Technology is available. They have not run for technology. They are available technology. They assimilated it in a meaningful, thoughtful way so that it actually creates the meaning. So, and the sanitization part I have already said, and interestingly, the sanitization module is called Defense, which has been created by the parent company, that FCA, that is Fiat Chrysler Automobile, and so you understand all are the basically kind of thoughtful, intelligent assimilation, but it has created a new meaning. This assimilation has created new meaning, so that is what is the objective. Similarly, I have talked about the HEV versioning also. Now, this is the new consideration that is coming in the electric car world and the automotive world. So, concept including product architecture and component sizing, this again the component sizing of different size and shape of this. When it is hybrid, then it is not only ICE engines, then it is also it is ICE engine as well as motor, so electric motors and batteries. Now what they have done is that they have got it from the existing range with some modifications, minor modifications, so that it downscale dependence on technology and making it design driven. So, by sizing of the motor and engine, which is not going into the nitty-gritty of technology, but by sizing the engine, that is designing that engine configuration, the objective is being realized. That is the idea or nicety of design driven innovation. Now, another example is that I have just told you that iPod, listening to music on the go, that was created by Apple, and the iPod today, all you know that what it is. But prior to iPod, endeavors were made to achieve this. We had the Walkman, CD based Walkman, and then only replacing the MP3 player. Then what happened? The technology substitution happened, and the Walkman was replaced by the MP3 player. Again, we have to note the Rio PMP 300, the first portable consumer MP3 digital audio player, which was created by Diamond Multimedia. Then Diamond became MP3 Association with the merger of few other companies like say Music Match or say Good Noise or say hardware company Zing Technologies, and they created MP3 altogether. They wanted to do this, but the limitation was that they could create, but and they could create, but the limitation was 30 minutes of music could be heard, and the capacity was 32 MB. The device was that. However, one thing we must say that it was smaller than the CD Walkman and obviated the need of carrying so many CDs. And as we said that Diamond and MP3 Association developed the software, and yet it was meant to get digital content onto the player. It was not truly still that it was not still central to the immersive experience of listening to music, which was discovered could be keenly observed and thought properly by Steve Jobs at Apple, and he listened to the market, to the industry, and thought with the foresight, the company. And Apple recognized that existing solutions were more technology replacements and strive to develop a product with a new meaning. We will see that. And here we see the Apple solution enabled users in converting their music bouquet to a high quality digital format, legally purchasing digital music flexibly and affordably, managing digital music libraries, storing much more songs on a single device by tapping into the latest information storage technology, that is the hard disk, which initially was available with 5 GB or 10 GB options. Why 5 GB or 10 GB options? We will come to that, because it was actually not developed for this iPod, but it was the hard drive that was developed for the then laptops. So those laptop hard drives were thought, so that hard drive was given a new meaning when it was brought here. It was not from scratch one was developing a hard drive, but it is to find the meaning of the hard drive, how it can be used. So here, and just not simply chasing technology. So playing on the hard drive, what they did, they made some little change with the co-created with the vendor, and that is why this 5 GB or 10 GB was there. But it created a meaning. That meaning could be interpreted, and such was created by repurposing the hard drive that was co-created, I said, with the vendors, and created the suitability with this co-creation, and that became the radical differentiator. That is what is important, and it was a trailblazer, and that permitted, interestingly, that caption came, 1,000 songs in your pocket. So it gave a new meaning. It is just not a music system, or it is not just listening music. It is 1,000 songs in your pocket. So it gives a different kind of freedom, flexibility, a meaning, a purpose of listening music, etc. So here we would talk about the design discourse proposed by Vaganti, and also we would just point out that how Apple implemented it. And so what is that? This listening, acquiring knowledge for gaining insights for possible product meanings. Then interpreting, developing vision and proposition of new meaning, referred to as proposal. Addressing, disseminating and sharing the vision with other networked interpreters. I am using a term called interpreters, so we will see what is that. Interpreters and influencing. Now, what happened due to this creation of new meaning, the approach, the new meaning, this approach was design-driven approach was used across other products like say MacBook, iMac, iPhone, that is which is the smartphone. These products embodied the tools that help users manage and tag along the way of using digital things. So it has changed the way people look at digital things. This led and are technology epiphanies that go beyond technology substitution. It is not merely mere technology substitution. It is coming from the original design thinking or driven concept. Another example quickly I will just look at is this is the Nintendo Wii, where technologically advanced consoles were already available with Sony PlayStation and Microsoft Xbox. But what actually they did was they tried and find out that those needs expertise and expertise in the doing that game, and it is not that many people could play together in a family as a family. So that is the concept. It is just not technology. That is a concept that was brought in. The design concept brought in. So in the case of design thinking, or in other words, design pushed strategy, design pushed, as I said, the innovation is driven by the ingenuity to cognize, foresee, and effectuate the creation of new product meanings. The uniqueness characterized in consequence of the meaning and the design language is more impactful than with the functional conformity and technology. Here we would see the issue, how will the customer focused modality work if there is no market yet for iPod or Ford's car? What will happen? how can the design team verify because see, if something is not there, how can they verify whether something would be how will they be able to comment whether it is required, because they don't have any experience, because they are always immersed with this immediacy, emergency problems, exigency, so they don't have the time or idea to look out and look for what tomorrow would require. Here, one thing I'd like to tell you here, the interesting thing is that I would put the quotation of two persons, as I said earlier, that what the customer would say. It is not to undermine or think that customers will not be able to give enough focus, but then that also is limited at some point in time, which is compensated through design driven approach. Now, what Henry Ford said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. That means if faster horses are there, it solves a problem, but they won't say we need a car. Similarly, Steve Jobs said, here is the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes. That means who doesn't match with the traditional concepts, the ones who see things differently. They are not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify and vilify them. About only one thing you cannot do is you cannot ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. So there lies the concept of both Steve Jobs. I read the quotation. I just read the quotation. You can read it because you don't have to remember quotations. But then what you get from this is that one has to think a step ahead. It is no way saying the customer is not to be considered or their viewpoints, but then also there is a one step ahead that has to be kept in mind. This apparent concept has been solved, that if the customer cannot say, the user cannot say what is required, but if that is required for futuristic product, then there is a conflict. How that can be solved? Here, Varganti has a solution. He has a proposal. He said that the customer here comes in the form of interpreter. As you remember, I asked you to look at the word interpreter. The customer from who the feedback is intended, and effectively interpreters who is interpreting is creating vision and proposing for new meanings. That's called interpreter, interpreting, creating vision and proposing new meanings. Who lead the design discourse are the interpreters. So we have to find out so many those interpreters who can give those feedback. The interpreter can be the designer himself, the organization itself. Like in case of Apple, it was Steve Jobs and Apple Inc. So for a car, it was Henry Ford. So these are things. Similarly, when compared to this Toyota, when Toyota came, it created its own this thing. Again, the same thing happened. So the suggestion is that to create a network of stakeholders, and those who would build new meanings, they would come as interpreter, who would connect between a manufacturer, its products, and all these stakeholders. So now, as I said, the coupling of paradigms, design driven, can go also with design thinking to that extent that design thinking is simple to implement, whereas DDI is with uncertainty, but it gives better result. Similarly, sometimes what happens that for the, as I said already, the design driven innovation, when coupled with technology pushed innovation, then it gives higher order excellence. That also is possible, but these are certain possibility of coupling. Products developed based on precepts of design driven process often allows premium pricing. That is also to be remembered, the gain. that if we do that, because of these advantages or advancedness of the product, the customers are ready to pay more premium price. So from that the more revenue comes and profit comes, and that's what gives competitive advantage, sustainable competitive advantage to the company. So this is what is the incentive for the companies, be it corporate organization, be it startup, to go for design driven innovation. So quickly roadmap, because finally if we have to implement, how do we implement that we have to see. So design driven, it is though these points are there, but it is not in linear sequence, when it can be done something in parallelly. So not exactly in that order, but then these are defining the problem. Most of them you will find that we have discussed in our discourse, but one or two changes are there. I will tell them what are they. Defining the problem, drawing up interpreters network, this is a new concept here. Identifying user needs, involving interpreters, again another new concept. Rest are more or less the same: vision and concept planning, screening and verification, concept selection, concept to MVP creation, and finally testing for commercialization. But this interpreter component is new, and therefore that comes in the roadmap. Now, the design driven innovation process serves to identify new product opportunities, drawing on user insight and the actionable assistive tools in the process, which are say that we use preliminary plans, bare bones, that is mocks, wireframes, prototypes, and also solution drafts. These are the tools we use in DDI. DDI method helps to reveal user behavior, practice, capability, and potential needs to conceptualize solutions that are novel, using product engineering competence that merits incorporation into research, design and development purpose for commercialization. So here I am not going to read them out. This I have created for your reading subsequently, but I have kept it in this PPT so that you can read. I have already given that, defining the problem, etc. I will only highlight these two things, that in specialty the interpreter related work, drawing up interpreter network, track down and denote the innovation and development support network, as well as the knowledge share strategy as to identify the potential interpreters for providing necessary inputs for design based radical innovation and development. So create a network of interpreters, that is very important, and how they will come we have understood. Similarly, after say, or at the similarly at the same time, maybe the user needs identified, and then involving interpreters, that is also important here. Involving selected interpreters for current information and sharing knowledge about the market, industry trends, as well as the future design possibilities, and support developing novel and value driven products. So these are two major differentiators. That you can read the rest, but then these two I have read out because these are two important things. So rest are there, you can study it in your own time, because we have discussed all this. Concept selection I have discussed in many times. I have just put down as a roadmap here again for a ready reference. So what we have seen, in conclusion, we are saying this presentation begins with the context associated with value proposition and design driven innovation, and compares the strategy with their design thinking. Then it delineates the radical perspectives and the steps of design driven innovation, followed with the example with the industry, that is the one of the Fiat Panda, the other one is of the iPod of Apple mainly, and DDI also touches upon the coupling, as we had discussed, of design paradigms as practiced and as possible, and closes with the application roadmap, because you will be using it. How you will be using it, that is there. So I hope you would be using it and you would derive a great satisfaction out of your new venture. And before I close, one thing I would just like to tell you, the reference part here. So just note it. And now I am sure that this particularly the roadmap for design driven innovation will help you in actually trying out real case, at least at the concept level, and it will help you to go a long way, and it will help you, I am sure. Thank you very much once again for listening to this discourse.